Good morning and welcome to a crazy edition of the Ultimate Cavs Show. It's another Cavs and Coffee coming at you. Jason Lloyd has returned from his trip to Europe and he brought back some presents, mainly these two hats for us. Jason, what are you rocking today?
This is my old man hat. My wife said she's officially married to an old man now. I kind of like it, so I'm going to stick with it.
And I'm rocking a cowboy hat. Why? Because I don't have an old man hat to match Jason with. So I said for the intro, before we dive into our two main topics today, flip it back. Nope. That looked like a Taliban headset when it was like that. Yeah.
Like a mushroom head.
Yeah, we're going to keep that forward. So
like
I got the cowboy hat on to start. Jason, how was your trip to Europe? Let's start with that real quick.
Awesome. It was phenomenal. It was great. A couple days in Germany to see my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. My brother-in-law stationed in Frankfurt, just outside Frankfurt. So we did a couple days there. Went to Paris for 4 or 5 days. Went to every museum I think the city has. My children still will not speak to me with the amount of walking that we did and museum tours that we did, but did the Louvre, did Musée d'Orsay, the Arc de Triomphe, Notre Dame, you name it. We went and saw it. So it was a great trip.
We'll dive into whether or not it is fair to compare this year's Cavaliers team to that 2014-2015 Hawks team that won 60 regular season games but did not reach the NBA Finals. We'll talk about some of the threats to the Cavs in the East. Before we dive into all of that, if you look in the top right corner of your screen, you'll see a little Cavs and Coffee logo our guy Robert Conley drew up for us. I got to figure out how to be able to move the logo on the screen in StreamYard so we can get it with our traditional background. But it's an awesome little design. I like the Cavs and Coffee idea, Jason. People have seemed to buy into that as a little naming piece of something that we could continue here. So shout out to Robert for that cool logo. And he did it in like 12 hours. He texted me and said, "Hey, can I draw you guys something?" I said, "Absolutely." By the end of the day, he had sent us that. I sent it to Jason, who finally got around to looking at it after he was done looking at the Mona Lisa and all those other sculptures in Europe. But shout out to Robert Conley. Does a great job with that kind of stuff, and we appreciate everything he does and sends us in because he's a hell of an artist.
Yeah, looks awesome. I like that the Cavs and Coffee concept has kind of latched on. It seems to be a hit with the morning crowd, a little bit different, something shake up that we haven't tried before, but it seems to be working. So it works great with my schedule. Kids are at school and we haven't gone to UCSS yet, so it's perfect.
Awesome. I'm going to change hats, Jason. Let's get back to a little more basketball-related hat.
I'm keeping it.
You keep yours. I'm going to go to a little more basketball hat.
People make fun of
switch
my hat.
The format here of our show.
Wait till you see the hat I've got for UCSS today, baby.
That is an incredible tease for anyone who wants to know. We were on at 11 o'clock this morning talking Russ Wilson, Jason Rodacom on Myles Garrett this morning. It's going to piss a lot of people off. We'll also talk some Cavs. I found a wild Cavs stat that if, Jason, you get, we're going to play a game. If you guys can guess this stat, you're going to win a prize. If any of you guys guess it, I will lose my mind because when I saw it, my jaw dropped down to the keyboard and I just started typing. Bleh. It's that crazy. But let's dive into what we're here to talk about today, Jason. Our first topic, our main topic, the title of today's show is why it's wildly disingenuous to compare this year's Cavaliers team to the 2014-2015 Atlanta Hawks team that won 60 regular season games and lost to LeBron James in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Okay.
Before we dive into some of those numbers, I want to tell everyone this real quick.
Go ahead.
Kenny Atkinson was the lead assistant on that team.
Yeah.
Damari Carroll was the starting small forward on that team. If any two people in the world can figure out, see firsthand some of the differences between Team A and Team B, it is probably the two people who were literally in the locker room every single day on those two organizations. Jason, the floor is yours.
Before you go, I just want to make one thing clear that why is everyone looking, first of all, at this 14-15 Hawks team like they were frauds? Why? They were a good team. They made it to the conference finals. They lost to LeBron. You know how many teams lost to LeBron in that stretch? All of them.
A lot.
In the East. They went, the Cavs, LeBron, not just the Cavs, LeBron went to the finals 8 straight years. They beat everybody. He got Dwayne Casey fired in Toronto. Dwayne was a good coach on a good Toronto team, got him fired. Atlanta was a good team, having a great year, won 60 games. It's not like they got knocked out in the first round. Like, this idea that the Hawks were some sort of frauds that year blows my mind. Like, at first I just kind of dismissed it because I agree with you. This is not an apples to apples comparison. But the more that this keeps coming up, everyone is like shitting on the Hawks and acting like they're this terrible team. I'm like, guys, if the Cavs lose in the conference finals to the Celtics this year, are they frauds? No. I don't think so. Why is this even a thing? I don't understand, but I just want to get that out there. The floor is yours.
I agree with a lot of what you said, and it's funny. I went back and looked at all the 1 seeds in the NBA, East and West, since that 2014-2015 season. I'm going to read you in the Eastern Conference how each 1 seed has fared, dating back to that Hawks team in 2014-15.
Okay.
The Hawks lost in the Eastern Conference Finals. In 16, the Cavaliers won the NBA championship. In 17, the Celtics lost in the Eastern Conference Finals. In 2018, the Cavs lost in the championship. 19, Bucks, Eastern Conference Finals. Since the turn of the 2020s, so in this last half decade, Bucks second round exit, Sixers second round exit, Heat Eastern Conference Finals loss. 2023 Milwaukee Bucks first round exit, and last year the Celtics won the championship. There are 3 teams in the last 10 years in the East alone that failed to make the conference championship. Let's go to the West. 2015 Warriors won the title. 16 they lost the title. 17 they won the title. 18 the Rockets lost in the Western Conference Finals. 19 Warriors lost in the championship. In 2020 the Lakers won the championship. In 2021 the Donovan Mitchell-led Utah Jazz lost in the second round. In 2022 the Phoenix Suns lost in the second round. The Nuggets won it all, and last year the Thunder lost in the second round. So we have 6 examples out of the last 21 seeds, Jason, who failed to make the conference finals, which baffles me as to why this Hawks team, who had a good but not great regular season, there have been 27 teams in the history of the league that won 60 games. 27.
Yeah.
That's how many the Hawks won that year. They went 60 and 22.
Yeah.
That is not elite company. It's very good company. It's a club. It's a VIP club, but it's not the exclusive back room of the VIP club. The Cavs have a chance to win 70 games this season. They have an .846 win percentage. They're on pace to win 69.5 games, Jason. Only 2 teams ever have won 70. The Cavs are in the conversation, have a legitimate shot of reaching 70. The Cavs are having an elite, historic regular season. The Hawks had a good regular season. Take nothing away from them. But this Cavs team is playing at an elite, historic pace. This season, the Hawks won 60 games. Golden State won 67. They weren't even the best regular season team that year. I have other stats, but I want to start with that. Jason, your response.
Yeah, I think the Cavs are obviously a legitimate team. I mean, we've stamped that early on. That they're going to be defined by what they do in the postseason. And if they lose in the first round, yeah, it's going to be a disappointing season. If they lose in the second round, it's going to be they got to make the conference finals. I'm not going to demand that this team makes the finals for it to be a success, but they at least got to get to what we presume would be Boston in the conference finals. Go back. You mentioned Milwaukee. That was a meltdown disaster when Milwaukee lost in the first round. Did that get Bud fired? I think Bud got fired after that, didn't he?
That was
Milwaukee. I'm pretty sure he got fired.
Yeah, that's 23, and then Adrian Griffin took over the next year.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, nobody's getting fired if the Cavs lose in the first round. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying like that was bad. But I don't expect. I think it's unfair to expect this team to ultimately make the NBA Finals. Boston is still really freaking good. There's other teams in the East that are good. We'll get to that in a minute of who can trip them up and who can't. But I do think that they need to get to the conference finals at this point, or else people are going to look at this as a disappointing season.
Yeah, that Bucks team, by the way, won 58 regular season games and lost in the first round of the playoffs. So what's more disappointing, winning 60 and losing in the Eastern Conference Finals, or winning 58 and losing in the first round? I just think the context of how we look at that Hawks team is way out of whack. Now, here's where some of the comparisons between the two teams do come into play. That Hawks team did not have a superstar, right? It was Jeff Teague, Kyle Korver, DeMar Carroll, Paul Millsap, and Al Horford. They did not have a single superstar. That season, they had 4 All-Stars. The starting 5 minus DeMar Carroll made the All-Star team. Jason, guess how many All-NBA players they had that season?
0.
That is correct. 4 All-Stars, 0 All-NBA players. So it was a team without a bona fide superstar, but was better because the collection of its parts played very well together. The Cavs are in a similar boat that they don't have a legitimate top 5 guy in the league. Donovan's never been a first-team All-NBA guy. They have no one on the roster that's ever made first-team All-NBA. Donovan should finish somewhere in the top 5 in MVP voting this season. I think he'll finish just outside the top 5 because of how the voting works and whatnot. I think he should be in the top 5, but they're not going to have a top 5 finisher this year. They did have 3 All-Stars, though, and I do think they have a chance to get 3 All-NBA guys. I think it's a lock for 2. And I think there's a slim chance, but there is a chance that Darius Garland can find his way onto that roster.
I don't disagree. Yeah.
If you look at the two rosters, if we were picking, Jason, the exercise we do, let's pick the 5 best players for the series. Donovan's the first pick if you had these two teams combined into a pool, unquestioned. I think Evan's the second pick. And I think there's a chance you can make a case for Darius being the third pick before you take anyone on that Hawks team. So when you look at the overall talent comparison between that 2014-15 Hawks and this year's Cavs, although Atlanta was incredibly talented and it was a different era, so we don't know how these guys would necessarily translate. It's not an apples-to-apples comparison.
Right.
The Cavs have more talent, and they're deeper. And I just think the top-end talent is better.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I'm going back and thinking, because I don't want to be a hypocrite. I remember, because I talked about this on UCSS. There was a game in Atlanta late that season, that 14-15 season, and the Hawks just hammered the Cavs. And people in Cleveland were panicked. Maybe they didn't hammer them. I have to go back and look at the score. But the Hawks won.
Find the box score?
Yeah, it was late in the year. I feel like it was late March or April of 2015, I guess it would have been. Yeah, 2015. And I remember being in the locker room and talking to those guys, and I left the arena.
It was in March. They won by, it was 106-97, but the Cavs had a bigger fourth quarter to make it close.
Yeah. Okay. So the Hawks were in control the whole game. And I remember leaving the arena, and I wrote that night, like, guys, don't worry. Cavs are going to beat Atlanta. Like, there's nothing to worry about there. And people thought I was just being a mouthpiece and a shill. I'm like, no, like, they are not worried at all about the Hawks, because to your point, they've got LeBron. Like, they've got the hammer in every series, and Atlanta had no answer for that. And that was the series where Bud was like literally almost in tears on the podium, saying, if anyone's got any ideas on how to stop this team, I'd gladly take them. Because this was like the start of the shooting binge era, and the Cavs were hammering threes at a rate that we've never really seen before at that time. And Bud was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do when their 5 is chanting fries on the corner with his feet set, knocking down threes. How do you defend this team? How do you guard this team? And I kind of feel that way about this Cavs team now. They don't have the hammer. They don't have LeBron. But how do you guard them, and how do you go against them when they can throw so many different looks at you? And the DeAndre thing, I think we're talking about him on the show today.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me that, like, I didn't realize how perfect of a fit he really was going to be until we saw it. Like, and I guess I didn't give enough credit to his role as a backup 4. I looked at him strictly as like a 3.
Yep.
And Kobe even said when they traded for him, he can play some backup 4 too. And I kind of thought, yeah, that's true. Okay. But I didn't realize at the time how good that was going to look with him at the 4 and Evan at the 5. And they are monsters. So this team now is far better built. And again, I don't want to make this sound like I'm killing the Hawks, because I'm not. They were a good team that had a good year. But this is a completely different level of basketball than what that team was. That team, the East was kind of down. If you go back and think, LeBron had just left Miami. The Cavs they had the Blatt disaster experience, and they were kind of finding their way of Kevin and LeBron and Kyrie together for the first time. And they totally remade that roster, and they needed time to figure things out. And it was just sort of a dip in the East, and the Hawks were there to fill that void. That's not the case with the East this year. The Celtics are monsters still. And the Cavs have hung with them, 2-2 in the regular season. Orlando's had a ton of injuries. I thought Orlando would really take a leap this year. They've just never been healthy. The East, there's no LeBron at the top of the East, but there's quality teams there that I think we're just maybe lacking a little bit in that. I probably shouldn't say that without researching a little bit more. But this Cavs team is the monster. They are legit just because of how versatile they are and how many different ways they can play. And when they get going, when they start shooting, I don't know how you're supposed to guard this team. I could totally picture another coach sitting on the podium in near tears in April this year saying, if anybody's got any ideas of what I'm supposed to do when Donovan and Darius are driving the lane and kicking the shooters on the corners, please, I'm all ears.
I'm going to save my what's the Cavs hammer for the next part of the show, Jason. We'll get to it in 5 minutes when we're talking about who can be a legitimate threat to the Cavs, because I think I've figured out, or at least I've come to my own personal conclusion, what makes this team so damn unguardable. So I'm going to save that for a second, but I want to finish off this Hawks comparison with this. Atlanta was great, but when LeBron's in the conference, especially in the East, you have to run through LeBron to become the best. And as much success as the Hawks had in the regular season, people in Cleveland, and I was still in college at the time, up at Emerson School, shout out to the Lions, we watched every Hawks game or Cavs game and said, yeah, the Cavs are better. They have LeBron and Kyrie and Kevin Love. Like, that is better than the trio or any combination Atlanta could put on the court. They were a great regular season team. They had playoff success. But for not a single second did anyone truly think that team is going to be able to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was the Cavs, just the LeBron era Cavaliers. This season, despite the fact that Boston is the reigning champs, you have people like Bill Simmons, the most diehard, sees green Celtics fan in the world, admitting on his podcast, one of the biggest basketball podcasts in the world, with Ryan Russillo, another Celtics fan by nature, that the Cavs are legitimate threats, and it's going to be incredibly difficult to beat them in a 7-game series. The Cavs have arrived. They are getting the respect and attention from other teams. You could pick and choose which national media outlets, if they even exist, to Jason's point, are giving them enough credit versus not giving enough credit, whatever. People in basketball understand how good this Cavs team is, how much of a threat they are in the playoffs, and there's not the trump card, the LeBron in the East that they have to get through. The Celtics are good. Do not mistake what I'm saying. The Celtics are a very, very good defending championship caliber team, but it ain't LeBron. And that's a difference. And I have one more stat I want to mention, Jason. I looked up just some of the basic numbers to show in comparison how much better Cleveland has been this year to the league average than the Hawks were back in 2014, because points per game, whatever, the game's different. The Cavs' offensive rating this season is 121.8. That's the best in the league. That's 9.2 points better than the league average. So almost 10 points better, 9.2, than the league average from an offensive rating. The Hawks that season, they had the 6th best offensive rating in basketball, 108.2, only 3.6 points better than league average. So the Cavs 2 times better compared to the league average than Atlanta was back in 2014-15. From a defensive standpoint, the Cavs 110.9 defensive rating, that's 7th in the league. The Hawks 102.3 defensive rating, that was 5th in the league. They are dead even, exactly even, 3.6 points better than league average. So defensively equal. Net rating, the Cavs this season 10.9 net rating. It's the 2nd best in the NBA, the 10th best ever in the history of the NBA. The Hawks net rating that season 5.9, that was 4th in the league that year. And the big difference, Atlanta beat teams in the regular season. They had an average margin of victory of 5.4 points. That was the 4th highest in the NBA that season. The Cavs' average margin of victory this year, 11.3 points. It's the 2nd biggest in basketball. Atlanta won a lot of regular season games. They are not a team that should be disrespected at the frequency of which they become disrespected online now as some fraudulent team. They don't deserve to be in that conversation. But they also don't deserve to be in the same conversation as this year's Cleveland Cavaliers because of the historic success they've had through the first 57 games of the year.
I don't disagree with anything you said. Yeah. I think I can't. I'm at the point now where it's like, let's just get to April and let's just enough of this. Let's get on with it. We can have this 70-win conversation of whether or not it's important. I don't think it is, frankly. But other than that, there's really nothing left to play for in the regular season. I'm just really anxious to get to the postseason and see what this team can do. Join the club. All right, Jason, we're going to talk about our next topic. It involves the postseason, but first, a quick word from FanDuel. Guys, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and right now they have a March Madness promo running. If you want to bet on Cinderellas, upsets, over-unders, who's going to cut down the nets when it's all said and done, you can do so on FanDuel, and right now they have a new promo code out there. If you sign up through the UCSS link at FanDuel.com/UCSS, and you win your first $5 bet, new customers then can get $200 in bonus bets. That first $5 bet, though, does have to win to get the bonus bets. Head over to FanDuel at FanDuel.com/UCSS to get in on the action. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA and the #1 sportsbook when it comes to March Madness. All right, Jason. We teased this a little earlier. It's time to dive into it. But when you look at the Eastern Conference, if you look at the standings right now, the Cavs have a
Big lead over the Boston Celtics, who lost last night to the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're up to an 8.5 game lead for the 1 seed in the East. They essentially have clinched it. ESPN Analytics give them a 99.9% chance of clinching the 1 seed in the East. The fight for the overall 1 seed in the league, the Cavs have that would be a 1.5 game lead over the Oklahoma City Thunder, correct? The Cavs at 55-10, the Thunder at 54-12. But we'll focus on the East for this right now, Jason. Milwaukee's been hotter of late, even though the Cavs beat them last weekend. The Knicks won on a buzzer beater last night against Portland, but they're without Jalen Brunson for the next at least week and a half. You have the Blazers. I'm not the Blazers. You have the Pistons, who have been red hot the last month and a half under JB Bickerstaff. You have the Pacers, who are still in that 4-seed conversation. You have the teams in the play-in, which leave a lot to be desired. Jason, is the East right now really just Cleveland and Boston, or is there another team outside of the Celtics that you think could give the Cavs a legitimate threat in a 7-game playoff series?
I'm going to listen, before I say this, I think the Cavs win, okay? But I do think Milwaukee, I wouldn't be shocked if Milwaukee beats them, and you and I disagree on that. You don't think Milwaukee can guard them, and you very well might be right. But I just look at the regular season as the Bucks are bored. Once you win that championship, man, once you drink the champagne, January, February, and March don't matter, man. It just doesn't matter. And they still have that championship DNA. They do have the hammer and Giannis and the NBA. When you've got the best player in the series, that matters. And I look at Milwaukee as having the best player in that series, and that matters. Now, again, I think the Cavs will win. If it's a Cavs-Bucks second-round matchup, I'm going to pick the Cavs to win. But I'm not going to be terribly stunned if Milwaukee was able to get them just because of that championship pedigree that we're talking about. Other than that, no, we were talking the other day. Like I said earlier, I thought Orlando would take a leap this year. They've had so many injuries. Without Suggs and Wagner, I don't think they can beat Cleveland. Atlanta's a fun team. They're nice. They're long and athletic, which has given this Cavs team problems at times. It would be a fun first-round series because of the Hunter trade, obviously. Hunter going against his old team. But ultimately, Atlanta's too young and inexperienced. They're not going to beat Cleveland in a playoff series. It's certainly at this point, it looks like Cleveland, Boston on a collision course for the conference finals. And anything less than that would be a disappointment, I think, from either side. I want to see Boston. You know, I don't want Boston. Maybe, you know, if you're a Cavs fan, you probably want Boston to something goes weird and wrong and you lose in the first or second round. I want to see Cavs Celtics in the conference finals and slug it out and may the best team win. Indiana's given this team problems at times. I don't think, again, a 7-game series is different than a regular season game. And I don't think Indiana has the horses to beat the Cavs. They play fast. They score a lot. I don't think they have the horses to beat Cleveland in a 7-game series. And the one thing that, and we've talked about this a little bit, and I think I'm going to write about this. I'm going to the Cavs game Sunday, and I might write about this of like, you know, this is the test now for Kenny Atkinson. And we've talked about it. You know, it was JB's test. JB had never been in that position. And what do you do as a coach? And somebody mentioned, I think you mentioned Kenny made the playoffs once with the Nets, and that's fine. Okay. But this is a much different, when you have a team with championship aspirations, that's a much different spot to be in than where he was before. And how do you handle when a team spends 3 or 4 days digging in on your film and knows all of your tendencies, or even a week knowing all of your tendencies? So now it's game 6 and they know every play you're running. What do you do? What do you come up with? What do you got in your bag that they haven't seen yet? And I think Kenny's been great with some of the ATOs. That was one of the frustrations that we had with JB, was they just weren't very creative. And when you're on the road and you're down 10, they go on a run, they go on a 6-0 run and the crowd's into it and you got to get a bucket. Where are you going? What's your play that's going to get you a bucket to get everyone to sit down and be quiet and try and get yourself back into this? This is a real test for him to how does he steer a championship caliber roster through the playoffs? He's never done it before. And so that's one of the things I'm fascinated to watch. JB struggled with it at times. I don't think there's any question about that. I gave him a break the first year because they just didn't have, the roster wasn't ready for the Knicks. They just weren't deep enough. And then, you know, we know what happened last year and they had some injuries at the end and it was unfortunate. And I think we knew by the end of the season, he was going to be gone. And now it's Kenny's turn to sort of steer that boat for the first time. And so I'm really curious to see that and how he matches up again. If there's another veteran coach out there, like a Tibbs, but I don't think the Knicks can compete with the Cavs. I think that they're unraveling a little bit. That's certainly, I think you and I would have had a different conversation about the Knicks in October than we are right now. But the reality is, I just don't think they're a team that can hang with the Cavs. So outside of Milwaukee, I don't think anybody else besides Boston can really be a threat to this team.
Milwaukee has Giannis, so they deserve at least some benefit of the doubt, considering he is a top 3 player in the world, would certainly be the best player in a series against Cleveland. However, we talked about this when they played on Friday. I don't think Milwaukee has anywhere near enough guys to guard Darius, Donovan, and Ty Jerome.
You could be right.
They can't keep those guys out of the paint. And Giannis may win a game or 2 by himself. But over the course of a 7-game series, I just think the overall depth of Cleveland and their ability to score at will would overcome what Milwaukee can do. We saw in that game on Friday, no one scored over 20 points for Cleveland. Nobody. 19, Max Strus was their leading scorer. They got contributions up and down the board. And Dame and Giannis had 50-plus combined. And they still lost by 12, and it was never really close for the final 6 minutes of the fourth quarter. So I don't think that's a great matchup for Milwaukee. When I look at the big picture in the East, it's Cleveland, it's Boston, that's everyone else. And I do think because of what Cleveland can do offensively, which I'm going to touch on in 1 second, New York, I just don't think can keep up. Indiana, for a game or 2, sure, but if they're not shooting 42% from 3.
Cavs aren't sweeping Indiana. Pacers would get them once, maybe twice, but they're not winning the series.
Yeah, and it's the playoffs. And Rick Carlisle is a hell of a coach.
Yep.
Made the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They have more playoff success on their resume than Cleveland does, frankly. Like, Halliburton has an Eastern Conference Finals appearance. Donovan's never made it out of the second round. Like, they do have to prove they can do that.
Yep.
However, what I think the hammer is for this Cavs team, Jason, and I was watching a ton of game footage, and I was going back and trying to find, I did a breakdown on Darius yesterday from the game again Tuesday against the Nets, and I went back to the Bulls game, and I went back to the Miami game and tried to figure out why the offense had slowed down early. And I'm not sure this is the right answer, but this was something I picked up on over the last couple of weeks. The Cavs are in the top 5 in the NBA in paint touches. And they're in the top 5 in the league in paint touches from their guards. Donovan and Darius do an incredible job getting past their defenders, getting a foot in the paint, and then making the right decision. Cleveland wants to. They don't always, but their goal on every offensive possession is to attack a rotation. Get in the paint, force the defense to rotate, find the open guy, and then he's attacking the rotation. Defenses can stay in front of you. They can help. They can collapse. They can muck stuff up if they're in their normal positions. But once you get in rotation, it's incredibly hard to help off rotations. Why? Because you're already moving to get to a spot to recover for the guy that already moved. And now as you're moving in one direction, the ball's coming back against the grain. And then you have to make a split-second decision on what you do. That is the Cavs. If you strip down their offense to its most basic principle, it is get a foot in the paint, kick it out, and attack a rotation. That leads to a bunch of threes. That leads to a bunch of drives. It leads to a bunch of drives and dump-offs. That is, at its most basic form, the Cavs' offensive principle, Jason. And in the start of the last couple of games, when they've gotten off to these slower starts, whether it be because Donovan didn't play on Tuesday and they had no Ty Jerome, whether it be because teams picked them up full court like Portland did 2 Sundays ago, they hadn't been getting to the paint as frequently as I think Kenny would like them to. And in a 7-game series, when you assume health, and let's figure for this conversation that everyone's healthy and playing, Donovan, Darius, Ty, DeAndre, whoever's on the court, they know that. And there's no throwaway possessions in a playoff game. You get 1 or 2 bad shots here and there. That's the nature of basketball. But when they continue to get a foot in the paint and attack closeouts, you mentioned the Budenholzer. How do you stop this? Well, when you have 4 or 5 guys that can shoot in the court and 4 or 5 guys that are playmakers off the dribble and 4 or 5 guys that can make the right decision 75% of the time or better, it's impossible to be in the right position on a second or third rotation. And the unselfishness with this, which this Cavs team plays with puts defenders in an impossible decision. Do I give the open layup or do I spread out and help on the 3? Well, I can't give up an open layup, but he's a 39% three-point shooter from the corner, and he's a 44% three-point shooter on catch and shoots from the corner. 3's more than 2. What do I do? And I think that's their trump card. And I think, Jason, when you and I have talked off the record on this show on UCSS about what makes this Cavs team special, they generate open looks and easier shots than almost any team in basketball.
Yeah.
And I told you when they played the Knicks, you weren't at that game, but I texted and I was go, damn, they're getting whatever they want. And New York can't generate good looks. Like just the difference in which Cleveland got quality shots to how New York or Milwaukee generates quality shots throughout the course of a 48-minute game. It's a night and day difference. And I think that at the end of the day is what's going to allow Cleveland to not run through the playoffs, but to have tremendous success in the playoffs. And Boston's the one team, because of how they switch, that makes you play their style more than any other team. That presents the biggest challenge in the East. OKC, different story there in the West. We'll get to them in the finals. But in the East, I'm not sure how any team outside of Boston has the horses to switch and make Cleveland play the offense they want them to play, as opposed to doing what Kenny Atkinson wants them to do.
That was a great breakdown. I can't disagree with any of it. I'm still going to say Milwaukee could beat them, but I would pick the Cavs. And it's really just based on experience and pedigree. But I think ultimately the thing with the playoffs is you're going to have a bad, because we were talking on the show earlier, like, how do you beat the Cavs? A couple months ago, I think we had a conversation, and like, there's nights where you're just not going to make shots. Mm-hmm. And there'll be nights in the playoffs where you just don't make shots. But it's hard to see this team going 4 games without making enough shots and getting enough stops to win against anybody outside Boston in the East. Take Boston out of the conversation. It's hard to even Milwaukee. It's hard to see a team that they're 4 times now they're going to not be able to generate looks. They're not going to be able to get creative offensively. They're not going to be able to drive pass swing to the open man and make enough shots to win. So it's fun, man. It's a fun time of year. It's fun to see this team not letting up at this point, because a lot of times at this point of the season, it's sort of the dog days of the season. Guys get bored. Teams get bored. I've seen some really bad Cavs losses in March, at the end of March, and everybody panics and says, this is back during the championship era, and oh my God, here we go again. They're unraveling. No, they're just bored. They'll be fine by, April 15th when the playoffs start. And this team, because they're young, because they haven't won anything yet, because Donovan keeps reminding them of that, because Donovan hasn't had a ton of playoff success. He's not, this is on him too. And being the guy who gets over the hump for himself. And, I had a conversation with him about that a few weeks ago, about like, he's at that point in his career where he has got to win. And he knows that. Like, he's got all the money. He's got all the all-star games. He's got all the all-NBAs, the contracts, all that stuff. Now it's time to win. He has to win. And he knows that. And I think that is what is driving this team to not let off the gas, because LeBron had the attitude of, just get me in, man. It doesn't matter. Regular season doesn't matter. I'll be the 8th seed and we'll go to the finals. Mm-hmm. And this team obviously hasn't had that success and is not built that way. This team is very much still on the Autobahn in Germany, going 110 down the freeway because they feel like they've got something to prove, and they do.
I think the one way you can kind of not stop the Cavs, but get them out of their rhythm, and we've seen Indiana do it. We saw Houston do it. We've seen OKC do it. The Nets tried to do it on Tuesday, was pressure in full court, be physical, make the refs blow their whistle. The refs aren't going to call everything. Trust me. We know that. And they may call one early, but Chris Paul used to swipe and hack every single play. Yeah. And you just knew the refs weren't going to call. He may pick up 1 or 2 fouls throughout the course of the game, but 80% of the times that he would smack your wrist was going unwhistled. And we saw Brooklyn do it pretty successfully in the first half. Granted, no Donovan, no Ty Jerome. But if you get physical with them, you make them take the ball up 94 feet against pressure. By the time they get across half court, by the time they're ready to start their drives to try and get that foot in the paint we mentioned earlier, you're 1 percentage point lower in the energy department. And that half-step difference, maybe being just a split second slower, could be the difference in a defender cutting off the drive as opposed to getting beat, and then that rotation happening, and then the Cavs are at their absolute best. So I think that's the one thing you can look at as we get ready to head towards the playoffs is how do teams use that against Cleveland, and what's Cleveland's counter come playoff time. But other than that, Jason, I'm not anointing the Cavs Eastern Conference champions by any means. Yeah. But it is them, Boston, in my mind, and then there's a significant drop-off between everyone else in the conference. If it's not a Cleveland-Boston Eastern Conference Finals, I frankly will be severely disappointed. If Orlando is healthy, I think Orlando could cause a lot of problems for this team. If the Knicks should be able to cause a lot of problems for this team. We saw it a couple years ago, but something is wrong with that team this year. And I haven't watched them every night. I'm not around. I don't know what it is, but there's something off with that team. And I don't know if this is just the Tibbs effect where guys are just grinding down and he's wearing them out.
But whatever it is, they're not. They should be able to compete with the Cavs, but they're not going to. I don't think they're going to, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of with you. Like it's Boston and Cleveland and then possibly Milwaukee. I don't think there's anybody else.
All right, Jason, we'll end with this. We got some viewer comments, but I just want to read one because it's something we didn't address. We appreciate everyone for tuning in this morning. Another great audience here for Cavs and Coffee. But our guy, Evan19 said, is it fair to say the Cavs would be betting dogs against anyone they face in the West? OKC, LA, even Denver. I think against OKC, they'd be dogs, but it'd be close. I think they'd be favored over Denver. LA, because it's the Lakers, because it's LeBron, because it's Luka, I have no idea how the books would value that. But I would say slight underdogs versus OKC, favorites versus Denver, and LA, complete wild card, depending on how Vegas wanted to value that.
I think the Cavs would be the favorite against the Lakers. I think they'd be favored against Denver, too. OKC, I agree. I think they'd be dogs against – they'll be dogs against Boston. And they'll be dogs against OKC, I think. But not by much.
It'd be close, yeah. Like a plus 120 and then minus 110 for OKC, something like that.
Yeah. So. I think that's about right.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for the first Cavs and Coffee episode since Jason Lloyd has returned to the States. Once again, shout out to our guy, Robert Conley. That's the logo a little bigger if you missed it.
Love it.
But it looks sweet. We'll have that in the corner once I can figure out how to move it. I'm going to put it right under the Ultimate Cavs sign on the right here, Jason. But I got to figure out how to move it on StreamYard, and I was doing too much research to fully dive into that. For today, we appreciate everybody tuning in. We will see you in exactly 2 hours and 23 minutes on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Jason is in today. We'll be discussing the Russ Wilson visit to Cleveland, why Jason thinks the Browns made a mistake re-signing Myles Garrett, what Malik Collins can do for the Browns. Mary Kay's going to join us to talk about the future of Nick Chubb. And I found a Cavs stat that's going to blow your guys' mind. I promise you that. Until next time, for Jason Lloyd, I'm Mikey McNuggets. We'll see you in 2 hours. Peace.